Back by popular demand is part 2 of the Ultimate Rivalries video. We'll be taking a look at 9 more clubs that have decided against the progress of another. We'll explore their motivations, success, and who's proved the point of being better. Until the noisy neighbours got rich, the Manchester derby was a one-sided affair. It hardly counted as a rivalry even. However, these days, with the red half of Manchester fledgling and the blue half thriving, it's a thrill-seeker's paradise. There's hardly been a boring derby between both Manchester clubs since their first meeting in 1888. One brings history and a huge dedicated fan base, while the other brings wealth and newfound success. But of course, their current status is only a little part of the reason for the hatred both clubs share for one another. The derby started to heat up in 2011 when United succumbed to a 6-1 pummeling to City, their biggest defeat yet. Need I mention the Aguero moment that is burned into the brains of every United faithful, or the 9-goal thriller played out in 2022. The noisy neighbours aren't all bark and no bite again. In terms of overall success, United have been the better club, with nearly double City's domestic silverware, leading their rivals 59-30. At the international stage, United are also ahead with 8 trophies to City's 4. However, all that could change if Pep remains at the helm and the Red Devils don't get their act together to become a dominant team again. Benfica and Porto make up 2 of the big 3 of the Portuguese Primeira Liga. However, of the 3 big teams, they're by far the most successful. Benfica is regarded as a more relaxed Lisbon side that plays calm, calculated football, while Porto's a hard-working side with grit. Their inherent culture has been a source of contention. So, you can imagine when Benfica slapped Porto 12-2 in the 1943 O Clásico for their biggest win margin, how it must have felt to be a Porto fan. Or worse, the players that allowed this to happen. Porto have tried to avenge this result. However, since the O Clásico first started in 1912 to date, they have yet to come remotely close. That said, Porto has had the upper hand when it comes to silverware, leading Benfica 91-98 for both domestic and international silverware. The 2 biggest clubs in Turkey are Fenerbahçe SK and Galatasaray SK. Like any other league, with 2 somewhat equally matched giants fighting for dominance, it's only natural that a rivalry would set in. The Kitalararasi derby first began a century ago in 1909 and continues to be the biggest football match in the Turkish league. Interestingly, this derby is considered an intercontinental meet, since Turkey sits in both Asia and Europe. Fenerbahçe SK represents the Asian half of Istanbul, while Galatasaray SK sits in the European half. But the rivalry is more than just about differences in geography and influences. It's about the founding principles of both clubs. Galatasaray was founded by students and is considered a petty club, compared to Fenerbahçe, which started as a club of the people. It's no surprise that both sets of fans despise each other. Competitively, Galatasaray has had the upper hand in the Kitalararasi derby when it comes to higher win margins, thumping Fenerbahçe merely 3 years after their first meeting in 1911. They're also in the lead for domestic championships, holding 23 to Fenerbahçe's 19. Looks like petty students win every time. The North London derby, where the best bottle jobs face off against the Premier League versions of Leverkusen. The first match between Arsenal and Tottenham happened a century ago in 1909. At the time, they weren't rivals. The Gunners were a team from the Woolwich district in southeast London, while Spurs were a North London club. But all of that changed when Arsenal moved from the southeast into Spurs' backyard, some 5 kilometres away. Naturally, Tottenham fans were unhappy. How dare a club that wasn't trophy-averse move in to show them up? Since then, the North London derby has become a battle for dominance, as Tottenham tried to prove they are the original North Londoners. How's that worked out? Well, not so good. Arsenal have been the better side by far. The Gunners rocked up to White Hart Lane in 1935 and decimated their new rivals 6-0. Since then, they've picked up 48 trophies to Spurs' 26, even chucking in an invincible season. Tottenham, on the other hand, have been made a laughingstock for never winning anything no matter how good they started. they couldn't even win a minor trophy, with arguably the most lethal striker in their ranks. The Marseille PSG rivalry is no different from that of Manchester United and City. The former represents decades of history at the pinnacle of competitive excellence, while the latter represents how far money can take you in the sport. Le Classique is the result of this rivalry. First played in 1970, the sentiment surrounding both teams after their subsequent meetings proved that a rivalry was inevitable. PSG were a fairly new team at the time, while Marseille were a contender for the league title, who would go on to win the Champions League some 2 decades later. Then came 1986, when the Parisians beat all odds to win their first championship. Olympique Marseille, on the other hand, had changed ownership. The new statuses of both clubs ultimately forced a bitter rivalry, after the then PSG boss Francis Borelli accused the Olympians and its new owner, Bernard Tapie, of manipulating matches. Le Classique became a heated encounter afterward, so you can just imagine how much that rivalry's grown ever since PSG came into wealth themselves and turned a once competitive league into a monopoly. The Parisians might have the better silverware collection historically, 34-23, and the higher win margin, 5-1 in 2017. But there's one thing that the Olympians have over them: a Champions League title. When the meeting between two sides is called a derby of the eternal enemies, you tend to get the feeling that both clubs wouldn't exactly take each other to prom. Such is the intensity of this Greek rivalry that it had to be spelled out exactly how much both sides despised one another. The rivalry between Olympiacos and Panathinaikos comes from the social differences between their fans and locations. Olympiacos is a club from Piraeus, a port city teeming with the working class. Panathinaikos, on the other hand, are based in the capital city of Athens. Oh, you know, that part of Greece that gets a lot of historical attention. If that's not enough reason to be jealous, being the capital city also means more upper-class fans for the club. So, is it any surprise then that the Derby of the Eternal Enemies is home to some of the most violent incidents during, after, or before a match? For example, in 1930, Olympiacos fans showed up to the derby with a coffin draped in green to signify the death of the Athenian side. The only problem was that Panathinaikos went on to dish out the biggest pummeling of the derby, finishing the match 8-2. Silverware-wise though, Olympiacos have been the more successful team, with 79 trophies to Panathinaikos' 42. Real Madrid already featured in the previous video for their rivalry with Barcelona, but they still have a much-heated clash with local rivals Atletico Madrid. El Derby Madrileno is the result of this rivalry. First played in 1906, this derby's produced some of the finest displays of brilliance from both sides, like the 10-goal thriller in 2019 when Atletico thumped Los Blancos 7-3 at the International Champions Cup. At the heart of this rivalry is political ideals, much like the Los Blancos' rivalry with the Catalan giants Barcelona. The turbulent Francisco Franco's regime was affiliated with Real Madrid during its time. Although the relationship was purely to make the regime look good, the mark stuck that Los Blancos allied with a dictator. As a result, Real Madrid was considered a club of the elite as opposed to Atletico, which represented the working class and everyday people. In terms of success, Real is by far the superior team, dominating both locally and on the international stage. Atletico's run is nothing to sniff at though, with success at both levels too, but they just don't compare. For perspective, Los Blancos have 98 trophies to Atletico's 33. That's almost triple the latter's hoard. The Premier League is littered with derbies, each fierce and beloved by fans. Like Real Madrid and Manchester United, Liverpool's been a competitive rival and a local one. For the Reds, their local rivals are Everton. The Merseyside derby is called a friendly derby because it's caused mainly by location, as both clubs are merely 400 meters apart. Besides that, neither have any social or political influences to make them hate each other. However, that's not to say their rivalry is in fact friendly. No, they play, if not for anything, for pride. The derby is so heated that it has the most red cards of any other derby in the Premier League, 21. Both clubs played an 11-goal thriller in 1993, with Liverpool scoring 7 and Everton replying with 4 of their own. It goes to show just how unfriendly and seriously both clubs take each other and their pride. Overall, Liverpool is the more successful Merseyside club, having won 65 major trophies to Everton's 15. That's quite the gap between both sides. Although something that Everton have no success on the international stage, that couldn't be more wrong, since the blue half of Merseyside have a UEFA Cup to their name. Much like the Milan clubs, AS Roma and SS Lazio are two clubs from Rome who share the same stadium. The Derby della Capitale is one of the fiercest matchups in the Italian Serie A, and it all began in 1929. For a long time in Serie A, clubs from North Italy dominated the competition. This made several other clubs join together to improve their resources. This was the case for the four small clubs in Rome. An offer for a unification was presented and 3 clubs agreed to it. 1 refused. The 3 clubs soon became AS Roma, while SS Lazio remained the outlier that wouldn't join the bandwagon. As you'd expect, this didn't translate well for the other clubs in the merger. The enmity has prevailed ever since, as both clubs fight to prove that their decision was better. It's been a century since, and this rivalry doesn't appear to stop. If anything, it appeared to pick up when Lazio and Roma hired 2 ex-Chelsea coaches, Sarri and Mourinho respectively. Then it became the derby of the ex-Chelsea coaches too. The Derby della Capitale has produced amazing results throughout the years, like the biggest win margin of 4-0 in Roma's favour. In terms of silverware collection, both teams have the uniquely weird position of having the same number of silverware, 2 international trophies and 14 domestic ones. It might just take longer to tell who made the right choice. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel and share the video. And as always, come back for more scintillating videos about the beautiful game.